Hey, David Brewster here with an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords to the Black Crowes. And of course, we're going to be talking about Rich Robinson. And the Black Crowes formed in Marietta, Georgia in 1984. And they definitely have that southern rock and blues and some R&B and soul and this slow groove, almost like a slow funk groove in a lot of their music. And I know the first time I heard them, they were very different than most of the groups on the scene at that time in the late 80s. And then they just dominated the 90s, successful albums and tours. They had a lot of videos that popped up on MTV. And for some reason, their music has always grabbed me. It just has this very human and kind of gritty and organic sound. And it's definitely, very raw and authentic, as far as the influences and the tones and the musical approach. And it took me a little while to really tap in and understand Rich Robinson's universe as far as his tunings and his overall approach on guitar. But definitely the Black Crowes are awesome. Now, the Black Crowes are one of those groups that regrettably I've never seen the full band live. And that really bothers me now because the group's kind of disbanded and then reformed and disbanded. And it's one of those bands where it's like, okay, am I ever going to see the Black Crowes complete? But I did see Rich Robinson actually back in 2004, and there's my old ticket stub. But that was an interesting show. It was actually in Evansville, Indiana, at a club that's no longer there, and I was excited, and I went to go see him. And that was in '04, kind of when he branched out and released, a solo album. And the band was phenomenal. He sounded great. He had a whole fleet of vintage guitars off the side of the stage, and I kind of positioned myself between the stage and where I could kind of keep an eye on his guitar tech because he changed guitars almost every song, different tones and different tunings, and it was a great show. But there were only maybe 40 or 50 people there, and I kept looking around thinking, you've got to be kidding me. They just sounded like dynamite. And I was really blown away and kind of shocked that they didn't have a huge crowd of people, but it was a great concert though. As far as Rich Robinson's tunings, he does experiment with different open tunings and altered tunings, and he does have some songs that are in standard tuning too. But Rich's big secret weapon is really the same secret weapon that Keith Richards has, and that's open G tuning. Now Keith, of course, notoriously has a five-string telly that he prefers, and he plays, an open G. Rich plays, a six string in open G, and he does utilize the low E in a lot of the chords and things that he plays. But aside from Keith Richards, I mean, he's definitely influenced by the Allman Brothers and, Jimmy Page, a little bit of Jimmy Page kind of snuck in there. But then another kind of secret, influence is Nick Drake, the late great British, singer-songwriter who really didn't find popularity while he was alive, but then after he passed away, and over the decades, he's definitely built, this giant, cult following. And Nick Drake's amazing, and he used a lot of altered tunings and these interesting textures and chords and sounds in his music. Really interesting, and it's definitely a big influence on Rich. And as far as open G tuning is concerned, it's really not that bad. So if you're not a big fan of altered tunings or you're a little leery of tuning, in open tunings, or maybe you've got a Floyd Rose and a locking tremolo and you don't really want to mess with, altered tunings. I can understand that. And I have had a lot of feedback and comments, asking, why don't I have a bar? I've got the Les Paul and I've got the Strat, which I blocked, the bridge and the tremolo off on the Strat, so it's not going to move, basically. And that stabilizes the tuning of this guitar. And I don't know. I just got into altered tunings. I found myself playing, down a half step and a drop D and experimenting with open tunings. And I just really didn't like having the locking nut and having to grab, wrenches and all that kind of stuff and sit there and just kind of baby the guitar into a different tuning. And as soon as I blocked the tremolo off, this guitar kind of reacted similar to the Les Paul, where it was very stable, and I could go a half step down or drop D or whatever tuning I was going to use. And it didn't really take very much time to kind of lock in and start playing. And with, open G, the easiest way to think of it is just think of standard tuning, and then we're going to do double drop D, all right? Your low E and your high E are both going to go down to a D, And then the only other string you have to change is the A string. Your A is going to go down to a G. So here we have D, G, D, G, B, D. And that's open G. So double drop D and then tune your A down to G and you're there. And that's Rich's big secret weapon that he's used, you know, in lots and lots of Black Crowes songs. With the opening, that was the song Remedy from the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion album. And I know when I first heard that tune, you know, I grabbed my guitar and I just played, you know, or attempted to play along in standard tuning and, you know, just regular chord forms. But I could hear that I was missing some things in there and it just didn't quite sound right to me. And then fast forward a number of years, this was about 7 or 8 years ago, I had a student in Chicago, and he was a huge Stones fan, a big Keith Richards fan, and he went out and bought a telly. He strung it with 5 strings, tuned it to open G, and brought it into his lesson. And he handed it to me and was like, you know, here, check it out. And I picked it up, and I started playing it, and it was like a giant light bulb went off over my head, and I got it. I understood, you know, the appeal. And all those years of not really understanding Keith Richards and not really playing Stone songs the right way, it just all vividly came into focus. And I thought, oh my gosh, I understand the appeal. Now I understand why he does that. And it really does have this kind of special, you know, mojo or sound. So with the opening, you know, we're in open G, and he's really just playing one finger power chords in the beginning. You know, that's an F, that's an E, and that's a C in this tuning. So there's, you know, F, E, and C. And then that second pass, that's E flat, D, and B flat. So, you know, he's just kind of grabbing those one-fingered shapes, and then he's kind of adding that inversion, you know, kind of the Keith Richards special right there. So right there, that's going to change that C to an F over C. And then down here, that's going to change that B flat to an E flat over B flat. You know, that kind of thing. You know, really interesting to hear the way the guitar reacts or responds when you play that. And then after that, he really just goes back to that C and starts grooving it. And then when the verse starts, just move down a whole step to B flat and do almost the same thing. Interesting guitar part, and I love the way the tuning kind of reacts with those chords. Right, up next is the song Cursed Diamond from Amorica, and this is honestly, I think, my favorite Black Crowes song. And it definitely has this shimmery kind of almost Jimmy Page kind of influenced chord sequence. You can also hear the Nick Drake influence as well. And it's really interesting, and we're still in open G, so it looks like this. So that first part, that's basically a G right there. played in a very unusual way. And then A7 over G. And then this is going to be an F9 technically. And then this is an E minor 6. And then the E flat augmented. And then that's going to move down to this, and that's basically a D6. And then you're going to remove those two and just bar the 7th fret, and that's D major. So those definitely have kind of a rain song sounding tonality. That's kind of what I hear when I hear that intro part. The second time through, it just moves down to that C, and then like an F over C. Alright, if you're familiar with that song, I really couldn't leave you hanging there on that last, the C and F over C part, this part. Because this is the chorus, it's so cool. So right there, he's basically playing the open A and the open G, but it's technically 2 Gs because we're in open G tuning. And then this right there, it's basically an F over A. It's just an implied chord, of course. And then you're going to flip that around the other way, and then that's going to be an E flat 5. And then basically move what you just did up a whole step, and you've got this. So that's basically a G over B, and then when it flips the other way, he's kind of playing with a C5 and a C flat 5 on this part. So he's really just kind of lowering that 5th, G down to a G flat. So one more time with that part. Cool, and I love those edgy kind of dissonant chords, but it sounds so cool in that song. The next example is from the song Heavy, which is from By Your Side, and compared to Cursed Diamond that we just looked at, which is very involved and kind of intricate with the chords. Heavy is very simple, and it has kind of a static chord and then this slinky kind of single note riff, and I don't know, it just grabs you. And that's kind of, one of the things I really like about the Black Crowes is they can have very involved and intricate, musical parts. And then sometimes they'll just pull out some cool riff or a rockin', guitar part like this. Very roots rock, kind of bluesy guitar part. So in the beginning right there, that's really just a B major chord. And then they start playing this little kind of slinky single note line. And then repeat that. second guitar actually chimes in with this. And that's basically a B6. And then combined with the other guitar part, it just sounds massive in there. You know, very simple guitar part, but it's very, I don't know, it's just got this driving kind of edge to it, a cool groove. And I really like guitar parts like that. It's simple, but very effective. Next, we're looking at the intro to Thorn in My Pride, which is also from the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion album. And you can see I've switched to an acoustic guitar, and we also have a capo on the 4th fret. So we're still in open G, but Rich added this capo and created this really cool guitar part. Something like this. It's interesting because in this tuning with the capo, we're basically kind of flirting with B right there. And he's kind of adding this. So that's kind of an F sharp minor over B implied, with the open string kind of pull-offs and stuff. And then right there, that's kind of a C sharp 7 over B. Right there, that's G major 7 over B, implied, once again. And then whenever he hits the open strings, that's really just B and then an E over B. So it's really interesting to hear those chords. But he's picking through it and playing it like that. Just kind of spelling that chord out and using, pull-offs to open strings. So let's go through that a little bit slower. Something like this. And then he kind of cycles through it again. The second time he ends with this bluesy kind of a turnaround slide. Something like this. Really interesting guitar part, and I really dig the fact he added a capo and kind of, came up with this really different kind of a chord sequence, and it's melodic, but you can definitely see how it's related to these implied chords. The last example is from the song Soul Singing, and this is from the Lions album, and you can see we got rid of the capo, but we are going to tune the guitar down an additional whole step. So instead of open G, Rich is using open F in this song, and that's going to be C, F, C, F, and then A and C. Very unusual, but it has this really foot stomping, kind of swampy feel, something like this. Really cool. And that's basically like an F6 is kind of what he's flirting with right there. And I love how he's using hammer-ons and open strings and kind of letting the notes blur and drone into each other. And then the second time, and he kind of adds a hammer-on pull-off there on the D string. and that's going to function as like a D minor 6. And then move all the way down here, and that's going to function as a C9. And then he does this very kind of Jimmy Page-esque fill. And there you're kind of playing off the B string with the open G ringing. And then you just loop it. Something like that. Really cool. That's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay, and I'm definitely a Black Crowes fan and, you know, an admirer of Rich's guitar approach. And he's a songwriting machine. I mean, really, if you look at all the material he's released with the Black Crowes, and then, you know, his own kind of solo output, I mean, it's really impressive to see all of these different mutations and kind of variations of that rootsy rock and blues and soul and all these different, you know, influences that he has. But you hear little pieces of the Allman Brothers and Zeppelin, Nick Drake, and I mean, you know, Peter Green, and there's all this stuff hiding in the Black Crowes music, and I really like it. And like I said earlier, you know, it has a very organic and earthy and human, you know, kind of feel and sound, and there's a lot of emotion, and a very, very powerful band for sure. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.